I never envisioned my life culminating in this moment. My name is Mia. I am 38 years of age. My spouse, Benjamin, is a prosperous entrepreneur. He is occupied with his professional responsibilities. His time is predominantly consumed by extensive business trips or by attending meetings while tethered to his phone and computer screens. I have consistently endorsed my husband's professional endeavors, recognizing the pressures he endures. Nevertheless, if he departs from the residence or exerts himself, I get an unusual sensation of deprivation and alone. We have a son named Alexander, currently 20 years of age. Alexander abhors confinement and perpetually yearns for autonomy. After 2 years of college, Alexander chose to withdraw to pursue employment, despite his family's financial stability and ability to support him. Alexander secured employment at a grocery store in proximity to our residence. He exerts much effort and typically returns home at midday to recuperate. This summer was particularly sweltering. The heat appeared to permeate every crevice of the door, diffusing throughout the home. One day, as on any other day, Benjamin departed for work early in the morning, preoccupied with his demanding schedule. The home fell silent when he decisively shut the door. I experienced the solitude of being the sole occupant in the huge expanse. Alexander continued to work the morning shift at the store and, as per normal, returned home at noon. The sun was elevated in the sky, emitting tremendous heat that caused the entire yard to tremble. I sat near the window, gazing out with a melancholic expression. The auditory indication of footfall in the distance heralded Alexander's return. The door opened and he entered, perspiration cascading down his brow, his t-shirt adhering to his physique. "Mother, the temperature is exceedingly high today." Alexander SED positioned the bag of goodies in the kitchen table. I smiled as I observed my eldest son mature each day. My heart overflowed with ineffable emotions. Alexander approached the refrigerator, retrieved a bottle of chilled water, and seated himself on the aged wooden chair. The chamber reverted to its customary silence, punctuated solely by the rhythmic rotation of the ceiling fan and the intermittent sound of water droplets cascading from the chilled water bottle onto the floor. We remained silent, each engrossed in our own reflections, under the oppressive July heat that afternoon. The oppressive heat was intolerable, prompting me to take a shower to alleviate the agony. Upon nearing the bathroom, I discerned the sound of flowing water. I advanced a few more steps and noticed that the bathroom door was ajar, disclosing a narrow opening through which a dim light emanated. Alexander stood naked beneath the water stream, notwithstanding my role as his mother. This scene caused my heart to quiver, throbbing as though it may leap from my chest. Uncertain of how to proceed, Alexander remained engrossed in the shower, oblivious to my presence, as I observed that intimate moment. The warmth enveloping me was not just attributable to the climate. Rather, it felt as though an inexplicable sensation was surging within, saturating my heart. At that moment, I was unable to articulate my emotions, acutely aware that the bewilderment and shame compelled me to depart swiftly to avoid detection. However, as I retreated, my foot inadvertently struck the nearby mop, causing it to tumble to the floor with a resounding noise. The abrupt sound induced panic in me. My heart constricted as I hurried back to the living room, avoiding any glance behind, hoping Alexander would remain oblivious to my presence in the chair. My heart raced, my breathing quickened, and my entire body shivered as though I had narrowly evaded a perilous circumstance. The sound of the mop's descent reverberated in my mind, instilling a fear that Alexander may recall or discern something abnormal. Nevertheless, the residents remained silent. The toilet was devoid of any auditory indication of footsteps. I attempted to soothe myself, but the internal turmoil persisted. The vision of Alexander unclothed remains vividly and tragically etched in my memory. For reasons unknown, the event appeared to elicit a profound response within me that I had long endeavored to suppress. The amalgamation of shame and remorse rendered me both perplexed and anxious. I rose and traversed the living room, attempting to expel the vision from my thoughts. However, it persistently resurfaced, tormenting and unsettling me. The sound of water in the bathroom ceased, and shortly thereafter, Alexander emerged, was merely enveloped in a towel. Water droplets were shimmering on his muscular shoulders. I briefly looked at him before intentionally averting my gaze, evading Alexander's eyes. However, I could not conceal the turmoil within my heart. Alexander regarded me briefly before offering a faint smile. "Mother, did you perceive any sound? I believe an object has just fallen." I endeavored to maintain a normal tone, despite my voice trembling slightly. Mother delivered them. After expressing such, I distinctly sensed a resonance in my words promptly. Averting my gaze to conceal my nervousness and shame, Alexander nodded and silently retreated to his room, shutting the door behind him. The house lapsed into oppressive silence once more, although my mind was consumed by the sensation of heat throughout my body, exacerbated by the summer warmth, alongside the haunting visage of Alexander, leaving me ensnared between reality and tumultuous, unwarranted thoughts. I seated myself in the chair, cradling my head in my hands, attempting to eradicate the persistent pictures in my mind. "Mia, what are you currently engaged in?" I attribute my feelings to my inner voice, which is laden with fear and humiliation. Despite my efforts to compose myself, my gaze towards Alexander had fundamentally changed. I was perplexed and uncertain about how to extricate myself from this maelstrom of bewildering feelings. Time elapsed swiftly, and the subsequent morning commenced with a similar cadence. Benjamin, as always, seated himself to consume breakfast with haste. His gaze was fixed on his phone screen, scrutinizing each email and message. I silently arranged the table for breakfast, striving to maintain a composed expression. Despite the sorrow that quietly emerged upon his announcement of an impending week-long business trip, despite my familiarity with Benjamin's hectic lifestyle, each time he declared his departure, my heart inevitably sank. A sensation of void, akin to insidious blackness, engulfed me. Rest assured, I will manage all domestic responsibilities. Following this work trip, Benjamin remarked, his tone rather hurried. He forced a smile before rising and exiting the house. The sound of the door shutting reverberated, departing the area, descending into an indistinct stillness. Alexander positioned himself opposite me, his hands delicately agitating the coffee cup before him. His eyes were contemplative, somewhat fatigued and reflective. After Benjamin departed, Alexander gazed above, seeking compassion. "Mother, I have a week of leave from the shop. Shall we embark on a journey? A considerable duration has elapsed since our family last ventured out together." I smiled while regretfully shaking my head. A glimmer of remorse appeared in my eyes. "Your father is exceedingly occupied. He is on a business trip for an entire week. This time, I was unable to." I couldn't help but observe that Alexander's eyes appeared somewhat melancholic, and his lips were pressed together as if he were suppressing something. He remained silent, merely nodding slightly before rising to clear the dishes from the table. I strongly sensed Alexander's desire for an authentic family excursion. Eliminated instances linked to labor and separation. Following breakfast, the residence was occupied just by the two of us. I contemplated the duration since I last had the opportunity to engage with Alexander's thoughts, emotions, and aspirations. It resembled a current that inadvertently propelled us into frenetic routines, preventing us from pausing to gaze intently into one another's eyes. We occupied the living room. The gentle breeze from outside entered through the partially open window, introducing a touch of fresh air and beautiful sunlight that trickled through the curtains, creating pleasant patterns of light on the carpet below. "Mother, I have much to convey to you." Alexander remarked that his voice had become significantly deeper and more mature than previously. "Whatever it may be, please convey it. I am attentive." I smiled gently, my eyes soft as I gazed at him. Encouraged, he recounted anecdotes about daily life, his work at the business, amusing customers, and unforeseen circumstances that elicited laughter. I listened intently, sensing that I had rediscovered a fragment of the link that had steadily diminished over the years. Alexander's eyes gleamed with delight as he reminisced about significant times, evoking an unusual warmth in my heart. Time elapsed swiftly, and I recognized that I was genuinely engrossed in the dialogue, as though all the gap between us had vanished in a moment of joy. "I find you to be quite large. Have you considered the prospect of having a girlfriend, Mother?" I observed numerous girls in the neighborhood gazing at me whenever I walked past. Alexander erupted in laughter, his eyes gleaming with delight. "Mother, let us discuss that at a measured pace. I remain committed to concentrating on my work." Initially, he conveyed his tone as both humorous and earnest. We persisted in our conversation, reminiscing about fond memories of family picnics during Alexander's childhood and instances of his mischief that led to reprimands from Benjamin and myself, which ultimately elicited laughter from the entire family. Amidst laughter, the atmosphere in the room was infused with mirth and animated narratives, reminiscent of joyous times long past. Time elapsed swiftly, and the midday sunlight illuminated the room more intensely through the window, enhancing its brightness and warmth. I sensed my heart uplift, as though the intangible gap between Alexander and me had been bridged by love and comprehension. A brief moment of stillness ensued. The clock indicated that it was about noon. Both mother and daughter gradually became silent, each absorbed in her own reflections. However, the atmosphere between us had transformed into a warmer, closer, and more tranquil state than ever before. Alexander abruptly gazed directly into my eyes and posed a question that rendered me breathless, uncertain of how to respond. Alexander's resonant yet distinct voice reverberated in the silent environment. "Mother, did you observe me bathing yesterday?" My heart raced, and my face flushed crimson. Upon hearing that question, my mouth became parched, incapable of articulating a word. Alexander gazed at me carefully, his eyes gleaming with a blend of interest and patience, as if anticipating a response while allowing me limited time to contemplate. He continued speaking, his tone somewhat softened, seemingly aiming to alleviate the tension between us. "In fact, I was aware yesterday that you were observing, but I feigned ignorance." Upon hearing that confession, my heart felt constricted, a mix of embarrassment and concern overwhelming me. Disorder engulfed my thoughts. Alexander was aware, so why did he remain mute until this moment? I attempted to articulate, but each word appeared lodged in my throat. Our gazes connected, and I experienced an inexplicable sensation, an ineffable connection, just as I was about to speak. Alexander abruptly interjected, shattering the uncomfortable pause. "Mother, I hold affection for you." Alexander's voice sounded soft yet resolved. "I have affection for you not in a maternal sense, but as a romantic partner." Alexander's abrupt revelation astonished me. My heart was filled with a conflation of feelings, shock, concern, and an indescribable emotion. My heart momentarily stopped to beat. His gaze remained fixed on mine. Those eyes embodied not only gravity, but also an indistinct optimism. I remained silent, uncertain of how to confront the newly unveiled facts. My heart fluttered, a sensation challenging to articulate as Alexander's words resonated in my ears. My mother inquired whether I desired a girlfriend. However, my heart yearned just for you. I sensed a constriction in my chest and an accelerated heartbeat, a sensation I had not encountered in a considerable duration. I was astonished and perplexed, struggling to articulate my disordered thoughts, yet encountered stillness. Alexander sat nearby, his eyes filled with concern, gentle as if perceiving my innermost thoughts. My heart aches amidst introspective inquiries. How can I experience such feelings despite not having been intimate? For how long did I merit the experience of feeling delicate and youthful once more? Are you earnest? I inquired urgently, articulating the words through quivering eyelashes. However, Alexander remained unresponsive. Instead, Alexander grasped my hand, warm as the core of spring. The gentleness in Alexander's gaze caused all my thoughts to vanish abruptly. Alexander enveloped me in his embrace, his arms securely around me as if to shield me from my anxieties. The sound of his heartbeat resonated like a coppery mist within his chest, and his breath warmed his ears. The whispered phrase, "I just want you," enveloped me like a silken fog. As Alexander's lips drew near, I raised my curtains and somersaulted. My heart was tumultuous and unrelenting. In that moment, I realized that no words could convey my emotions as effectively as Alexander's embrace. From the instant Alexander and I surrendered to one another, all boundaries appeared to dissolve. We held nothing back, losing ourselves in each other's arms, as if the external world ceased to exist. From that day forth, a secret emerged between us, a clandestine and perilous affair. Whenever Benjamin was away, the typically tranquil house transformed into a realm of intense undercurrents. Alexander's gaze ignited all suspicion within me, and I found myself unable to resist that inexplicable allure. The sound of the door closing, the careful footsteps, and the hurried embrace suggested a fear of being observed. We both understood that this connection was untenable and would inevitably result in anguish, yet we nevertheless plunged into one another, despite all logic, akin to moths attracted to an illicit illumination in clandestine instances. I disregarded the repercussions and the admonitions. I understood that for Alexander, the taboo became increasingly alluring, but every secret has a finite duration, and I am acutely aware that eventually the truth will emerge and strip us of all we cling to. Alexander and I persist in our existence in a conflict between emotion and rationality. Whenever we encounter one another, humiliation and unacknowledged desire invariably manifest in our eyes. Unintentional encounters that plague my inner turmoil daily, yet I remain unable to desist. We experience instances that we both recognize as inappropriate, moments brimming with emotion yet laden with guilt. One afternoon, Benjamin unexpectedly returned home earlier than anticipated. The sound of the car halting in the driveway and the key turning in the lock rendered me speechless, a surge of fear enveloping me. Alexander and I hastily disengaged, our eyes filled with confusion and anxiety. Upon entering, Benjamin appeared fatigued, yet his gaze was probing as he scrutinized both me and Alexander, harboring a hint of suspicion, though he uttered no words. The mood in the room was taut, akin to a string on the verge of snapping. I recognized that this situation was unsustainable. The tension among the three of us was oppressive. I had to confront the reality that I needed to terminate this detrimental connection before it became irreversible. One evening, I summoned Alexander to the porch. The subdued illumination illuminated his visage. His eyes brimmed with emotion. "We cannot continue in this manner, Alexander," I murmured, my voice faltering. "I cherish you as a son, and that is the appropriate course of action. Any alternative would merely result in suffering." Alexander became silent, his gaze directed at the ground, a look of sorrow manifesting on his face. Ultimately, he acquiesced, his shoulders sagging as though a substantial weight had been removed. Our romance concluded discreetly. However, the anguish persisted in both our hearts. Benjamin was unaware of the events that had transpired. I resolved to dedicate additional time to my family, to mend my internal fractures and restore trust. Alexander departed from home temporarily to seek equilibrium and establish a new existence. I saw that at times, loneliness and a desire for affection might lead individuals to engage in inappropriate actions. The most significant lesson I acquired was the importance of truthfulness and the bravery to confront one's own emotions in order to safeguard what is genuinely valuable. One must relinquish what is not meant to be retained, resulting in a degree of regret and contemplation, while simultaneously fostering the commencement of healing and progression. Having endured numerous experiences, I wish to convey some reflections to people encountering the same obstacles or feelings. I learned the importance of self-awareness and confronting solitude. There was a period when I experienced profound loneliness and emptiness. Rather than seeking solace in inappropriate avenues, I recognized the necessity to confront these emotions, introspectively inquire into their origins, and endeavor to resolve the underlying issues. Uphold limits and honor your self-worth when confronting challenging emotions. I recognize that establishing boundaries in relationships is critically vital. Self-respect and respect for others mitigate the likelihood of regrettable errors. Effective communication and connection are essential when experiencing loneliness in a relationship. Initiate dialogue. Often, an honest conversation can resolve misunderstandings and foster connection. Practice self-forgiveness and personal growth. I have made errors, and confronting regret is challenging. However, I recognize that self-reproach exacerbates the situation. Learning to forgive oneself is the initial step toward healing and progression. Value the relationships that hold true significance. Ultimately, I have discovered that nothing is more invaluable than love and connection with those who genuinely care. Do not allow transient emotions to lead to loss. Should you encounter confusion, disorientation, or internal conflict, pause to introspect, confront your thoughts, and select the appropriate course of action. I have come to understand that strength encompasses not just resilience, but also the discernment to cease when necessary.